What up, everyone? This is Mr. Lord, Dr. Professor, Dark Joker, with another edition of Where, Pick, and Dare, where I pick games for the various games that are occurring tomorrow. Whether it's football, baseball, basketball, basically whatever games I want to pick, I will pick them. With all that being said, on with the video. MLB, New York Mets versus New York Yankees. So the Mets have a 37.4% chance to win, and the Yankees have a 62.6% chance to win. This is at Yankee Stadium. And so for pitchers, Canning for the Mets has an ERA of 2.36 and a WHIP of 1.26. And Schmidt for the Yankees has an ERA of 4.73 and a WHIP of 1.28. So, Yankees are basically going to have home field advantage probably regardless of where it's at because, you know, I mean, I've never been to New York, but I could probably safely say there are a lot more Yankees fans than Mets fans. And so basically regardless of that, it's probably gonna be almost like home field advantage for the Yankees. But, you know, the pitching, it's good pitching for the Mets, not necessarily great pitching for the Yankees, at least for their stars. Now the Yankees, they have a lot of good hitters. So, of course, so do the Mets, two of the best hitting teams in the MLB. This is this Subway series, like this is a good one. You know, two of the top teams in the league. So I think with the pitching advantage that the Mets have, I think the Mets beat the Yankees tomorrow. Houston Astros versus Texas Rangers. So the Astros have a 44.9% chance to win, and the Rangers have a 55.1% chance to win. This is at Texas. Uh, for pitchers, Blanco for the Astros has an ERA of 4.04 and the WHIP of 1.16, and Maul for the Rangers has an ERA of 1.47, the WHIP of 0.96. So definite pitching advantage for the Rangers. Really good pitching from Maul, and not necessarily great pitching for Blanco. His ERA is definitely higher than you want it to be at. So with the home field advantage and the pitching advantage, I think the Rangers will beat the Astros tomorrow. St. Louis Cardinals versus Kansas City Royals. The Cards have a 46.7% chance to win, and the Royals have a 53.3% chance to win. This is at Kansas City. For pitchers, Mikolas for the Cards has an ERA of 4.35 and a WHIP of 1.3. And Lugo for the Royals has an ERA of 3.02 and a WHIP of 1.09. So, good pitching for Lugo, not necessarily great pitching for Mikolas. I mean, that ERA is not where you want to be at. You want it below 4. So, with home field advantage and the pitching advantage, I think the Royals beat the Cardinals tomorrow. Seattle Mariners versus San Diego Padres. The Mariners have a 40.6% chance to win, and the Padres have a 59.4% chance to win. This is at San Diego. For pitching, Hancock for the Mariners has an ERA of 6.91 and a WHIP of 1.71. And Pivetta for the Padres has an ERA of 3.05 and a WHIP of 1.06. So yeah, good pitching for Pivetta, not good pitching for Hancock. Like that is a terrible ERA. Like, I mean, yeah, he's only pitched 28 and 2/3 innings this year, but 6.91, that's freaking awful. So yeah, no, definite advantage for Pivetta over, Hancock. So yeah, so with the pitching advantage and the home field advantage, I think the Padres are going to beat the Mariners tomorrow. The Athletics versus the San Francisco Giants. The A's have a 36.2% chance to win, and the Giants have a 63.8% chance to win. This is at San Francisco. For pitching, Severino for the A's has an ERA of 4.7 and a WHIP of 1.32. And Ralph for the Giants has an ERA of 4.95 and a WHIP of 1.5. So not necessarily great pitching for either team. They're both like a little under 5, which is not what you want. You want below 4. Like you want to be around like at worst like around the threes. But it's very close, so it's not a significant difference in pitching between the two. So I think home field advantage will play the biggest role here. So I think the Giants beat the Athletics tomorrow. College baseball, Wake Forest versus Louisville Cardinals. So Wake Forest has already clinched the series. They won games 1 and 2, so they already clinched. So the only thing Louisville can do is prevent a sweep. And this is at Louisville, so they'll have home field advantage, and I think they'll prevent a sweep. They're obviously they've lost a series, and that might affect their seeding a little bit. But I think they'll be able to salvage a win tomorrow over the Deacons and avoid the sweep. Kansas Jayhawks versus West Virginia Mountaineers. So yeah, Kansas won both game 1 and game 2. So they clinched the series over West Virginia, like at West Virginia. Yeah, so unranked team with a lot of wins beat a ranked team. So the only thing West Virginia can do is, prevent a sweep. And I think with the home field advantage, that I think, which I don't know how it's West Virginia. I don't know how much of a home field advantage it necessarily is, but I think they'll be able to avoid the sweep tomorrow. So I think West Virginia will beat Kansas tomorrow. Virginia Cavaliers versus Virginia Tech Hokies. So this series is tied. Virginia won game 1, and Virginia Tech won game 2. So whoever wins tomorrow wins the series. Both they got over 30 wins. They're unranked, so they're doing pretty well for unranked teams. You know, so yeah, this is at Virginia Tech. So I think the home field advantage will be with them, and I think the Hokies beat the Cavaliers tomorrow to clinch the series. Notre Dame Fighting Irish versus Miami Hurricanes Game 3. So this series is tied. Notre Dame won Game 1 and Miami won Game 2. So whoever wins tomorrow clinches the series. So yeah, I think with this being at Miami, one of the bigger baseball towns in the nation, I think the home field advantage, with this being part of the lead up to the ACC tournament, they both want good seating if they're able to get in. So I think with home field advantage, I believe that the Hurricanes will beat the Fighting Irish tomorrow to win the series. Oregon Ducks versus Iowa Hawkeyes. See, so Oregon won both game 1 and game 2, so they clinched the series. And this is a number 5 team in the nation versus an unranked team that has more than 30 wins, so pretty good for an unranked team. So this is at Iowa. Clearly home field advantage didn't help them the first 2 games. I mean, Oregon's ranked number 5 for a reason. So I think that whatever home field advantage Iowa has, that ain't gonna help tomorrow. I think Oregon beats Iowa tomorrow to finish the sweep. North Carolina Tar Heels versus Florida State Seminoles, Game 3. So North Carolina won both Game 1, Game 2, so they clinched the series. So the only thing Florida State can do is prevent a sweep. And, this is at Florida State. They both schools have good histories in baseball. But I think with with North Carolina having clutch series, some of them may not be as inclined to show up. I mean, I don't know how many fans North Carolina brought down there. That is a long drive to Tallahassee. So, eh, I think Florida State is able to salvage a win tomorrow. I think they're able to prevent the sweep and maybe help their season a little bit by not having the other loss of the column. Auburn Tigers versus Ole Miss Rebels Game 3. So Ole Miss clinched the series by winning Game 1 and Game 2. At Oxford, that is one of the toughest stadiums to play in. If you're opposing team, that like the Mississippi schools in the SEC are not easy to play in. You know, so the only thing Auburn can do is prevent a sweep. And I think they'll be able to do that. Like I don't think Ole Miss is sweeping Auburn. Like there's reasons there's reasons Auburn's as highly ranked as they are. There's reasons Ole Miss is not in the rankings anymore. So I think Auburn wins Game 3 tomorrow to prevent the sweep. Texas Longhorns versus Oklahoma Sooners. So this series is tied with Texas winning Game 1 and Oklahoma winning Game 2. So whoever wins tomorrow wins the series. Interesting way to end the regular season. Have Red River rivalry go into Game 3. It'll be a big game tomorrow. This is at Oklahoma, so some home field advantage there. But we all know how good Texas is. They played very well this year. Oklahoma's not ranked, for reasons. Texas is just a lot better. I mean, if this was at Texas, I think it probably would have been a sweep. But it's not at Texas. And I think Texas will, you know, get the win over Oklahoma tomorrow to clinch the series, to go into the SEC tournament with a series win, in their recent memory. Tennessee Volunteers versus Arkansas Razorbacks, Game 3. So this series is tied. Tennessee won Game 1. Arkansas won Game 2. So tomorrow, determines the series. This is one of the bigger series, this weekend. You know, both teams being ranked SEC teams, conference tournament starting very soon. You know, this could be a big series. Game 3 is going to be really big. And yeah, I think hmm, I think Arkansas gets the win tomorrow over Tennessee in order to win the series. Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets versus Duke Blue Devils. So this series is tied with Tech winning Game 1 and Duke winning Game 2. So whoever wins tomorrow wins the series. And I think with Tech, with some of the issues they've had against some of the big opponents like Miami, yeah, that was a big loss. They had another big loss. I can't remember who it was, but anyway, so obviously Tech has had some issues against big opponents, and they're at Duke. Duke's really good. They're ranked for a reason. I think Duke beats Notre Dame tomorrow to win the series. Alabama Crimson Tide versus Florida Gators Game 3. So Florida won Game 1, and Alabama won Game 2. So this series is tied. Whoever wins tomorrow wins the series. Is that Florida, one of the more difficult stadiums to play in, and Alabama won't. I doubt they will have like a lot of like fan support appear at the game. So yeah, I think with the home field advantage, I think Florida beats Alabama tomorrow to win the series. Southern Miss Golden Eagles versus Troy Trojans. Yeah, so Southern Miss won both game one, game two, so they clinched the series against Troy. I mean, Troy's not necessarily gonna have much of a home field advantage. I mean, it's Troy. I mean, Southern Miss, I think, would have a bigger like baseball field and all that than Troy. Southern Miss, the Mississippi schools are doing pretty good. Southern Miss a lot of times can have one of the better like group of five teams as far as like baseball is concerned. You know, yeah, Southern Miss has a chance to sweep. Troy has a chance to, salvage a win to prevent the sweep, which I think they'll do. Like they lost the series, but I think they'll prevent Southern Miss from sweeping them tomorrow and will beat the Golden and they will and the Trojans will beat the Golden Eagles tomorrow. And that's it for picks. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to my picks. Do you agree with them? Do you not? If you have different picks, you can put them in the comments. But other than that, please like, subscribe, and all that. Thank you for listening and look forward to the next video.